Hoops fans, and welcome to the Believe the Hype 2014-2015 NBA season preview video and podcast as well. I'm Tom Reed, and as always, I'm joined by Benyam. G'day. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great, thanks, Tom. We've got a huge show coming up today. We're going to preview both the Eastern and Western Conference for the upcoming 2014-15 NBA season. We're going to go through the race, the chase, who's in it to win it. We'll look at the biggest off-season moves of the summer, as well as the rookies that are coming into the league as well and making their debuts. But we'll also have a third video coming up after as well, which will just be the Twitter questions that you guys have done such a fantastic job of sending through as well. So this will be a three-part series for the season preview, but we'll start at the top with the East.
Yeah, we definitely start with the East. Let's start with some of the biggest moves from the off-season. And, I mean, you can't talk about the off-season in the East without talking about arguably the biggest move in the NBA in the off-season. Jarrett Jack is now with the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, a very, very big move. But let's talk about maybe where he came from in the Cleveland Cavaliers. Probably a slightly bigger move for this season.
What did they do?
They added LeBron James.
I did not hear about that.
They added Kevin Love. They have a very, very stacked roster. This is it's an unfair team, the fact that they have Kevin Love, one of the best stretch forward in the league. They have LeBron James, the best player in the league, and Kyrie Irving, arguably the best young point guard in the league. This is a very stacked team and almost the opposite from last year's team.
Yeah, it is almost the opposite from last year's team. A team that won 33 games. Jarrett Jack led them to 33 wins. This is all about Jarrett Jack today. But no, from that to the team where they are now, we're now looking at them being a contender for this year, and with the youth experience, the championship experience that LeBron James, Mike Miller, James Jones, all those guys bring to the team, plus the youth of Kyrie Irving, Tristan Thompson, Dion Waiters. This is a team that is seriously well put together and that can contend now and into the future as well. And I mean, one of the real underrated additions that this team had, which is sort of getting a bit overlooked now that everyone's talking about LeBron James, is David Blatt.
Absolutely. Bringing David Blatt into this team has been not talked about as much as it probably should have, but you're bringing a guy with European championship pedigree, a guy who plays a very up-tempo, very fast-paced, almost San Antonio Spurs-esque style offense, which everyone is raving about, from the players to the media and everyone in between. And I think this is going to be one of those situations where you get guys that are playing their natural positions. You've got Kevin Love as a stretch forward, you've got LeBron James back at the small forward position. All these pieces just fit a little bit better, which a lot of the talk has been about whether this is a better situation for LeBron James now than he was in 2010 with the Miami Heat. Do you think this is a better fit for him right now?
Than 2010?
It's a better situation?
I wouldn't say it's a better situation right now than 2010 because, I mean, look, LeBron was at the peak of his game then, Chris Bosh was at the peak of his game, Dwayne Wade was at the peak of his game. I feel that was a great situation there for the few years that he was there. If you look at this situation he's in right now versus last year, I'd definitely say that this is a better situation where he is right now. He's still got a big three around him with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, but they're that little bit younger. So it gives him that extra few years now that he can contend for titles.
Well, we're all talking about the positives and how great a move this is, and obviously it is fantastic, but there are still a couple of little holes in this situation. I mean, rim protection is obviously the biggest issue. They don't really have a guy that can protect the paint, but the Miami Heat got away with that for 4 years, so you'd like to think that the Cleveland Cavaliers are in a similar position that they could do the same. And that's really my only real concern with this team.
It's one of those things that always sort of has to be mentioned, the fact that they don't have a rim protector. But I mean, as what we've seen with LeBron James over the last 4 years, as you said, he's been able to deal without having a rim protector, which just shows how good he is and how good the teams are that he has been around. But another couple of issues and question marks I have with the team is one, I mean, I hate talking about injuries, but health.
That's true. Kyrie Irving has had a lot of trouble over the last few years.
Yep, I mean, he hasn't played a full season, and Kevin Love as well. Kevin Love, has had inconsistent health throughout his career as well, and also Kyrie's consistency as well throughout the season.
He does sort of fade out of games a little bit sometimes. You don't normally get that full 48-minute effort with him every single night, which I think that's probably going to change because we see the way he plays in those elite teams, or he's playing on all-star teams, or he's playing at the FIBA World Cup. When he's playing with great players, it sort of takes him to another level. But that's enough of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let's talk about the Chicago Bulls. They have silently made a couple of moves that I think have genuinely put them in contention to not just be the number 2 team, but I think on equal footing with the Cleveland Cavaliers to be the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference. Adding Pau Gasol and getting Derrick Rose back is huge for the Chicago Bulls.
Well, the Chicago Bulls, I mean, the big question mark with them last year, they're a great defensive team. Tom Thibodeau's defensive teams are just the benchmark of the league, but they couldn't score. That's where they got undone last year against Washington. And bringing Pau Gasol in, who's arguably one of the best offensive big men with his passing game, he can step out, he can hit shots from there. And Derrick Rose, who's an awesome scoring point guard, that's
probably the best
his bread and
scoring point guard in the league.
Yeah. So bringing those two guys in, that shores up their offense. That makes them that little bit more dangerous than they were last year. And I mean, bring in Doug McDermott as well, who McBuckets can hit a three from
Just
absolutely
guys
anywhere
that
on
can
the
knock down shots.
Guys that can score, who can also still fit in the defensive identity of the Chicago Bulls. That they've absolutely nailed their off season and are definitely one of the teams to watch this year.
All right, now another one of the big moves from this offseason, which I'm particularly excited about, is Lance Stevenson joining the Charlotte Hornets. Not just because it's Lance, but it's because the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets are back, which is probably the biggest move of the offseason. We've got a whole team that's returned, but I really, really like the fit of Lance Stevenson as a Charlotte Hornet. We talk about the Chicago Bulls and their struggles offensively, the fact that they weren't able to ignite their offense. The Indiana Pacers at times sort of had that problem, and Lance Stevenson was the guy that was able to do that. Now, the Charlotte Hornets, a team that did struggle with that same sort of problem last year, has sort of resulted in getting Lance, a guy that can create off the dribble. He can make his own shots, but he can also facilitate, rebound, and just be that little bit of a glue guy that I think the Bobcats, as they were last year, were missing.
That's exactly it. Last year, the Charlotte Bobcats, their bread and butter was what was their defense, and somehow a team which is anchored around Al, Big Al, was a good defensive team.
Defender. It was a system of defense.
Yeah.
I don't want to put too much on Al Jefferson.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's him that did it, but it was amazing. The team which was anchored by him was one of the best. Was a top 4 defensive team in the Eastern Conference, and bringing Lance in, who's one of the best young perimeter defenders in the league, but also a guy who can create his own shot, create off the dribble. He can facilitate. He's one of the best pick and roll players in the NBA. He's definitely added to exactly what they needed, which was that guy who can create off the perimeter for himself, and can be a scorer.
Okay, now we're talking about a lot of guys that are moving around, moving teams, but when it comes to re-signing players, I think that's something that gets overlooked as well, because the New York Knicks were, I want to say, this close to losing Carmelo Anthony, and obviously with the Miami Heat as well, re-signing Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. You're bringing these guys back now. Reloading your team for me is, I think, just as important as going out and getting new guys, and especially for the New York Knicks, because now they're looking at a team with a new triangle, with a new coach. They're looking at potentially being, they want to be a top 4 team. They'll be lucky to be a top 8 team, but without Carmelo Anthony re-signing, the Knicks are back in the lottery. So I think that's something that you really have to look at that as a make or break situation for the Knicks. And I'm a little bit excited to see what Phil Jackson and Derek Fisher can do with this ragtag bunch of guys in New York.
I mean, I'm excited to see how this new era of New York basketball is going to work out. But still, man, Melo's getting Oprah money out there. Like he is eating so much of that cap. I mean, obviously we do have in a couple of years' time the cap could be up to $90 million, so it won't be too much of an issue. But I still think. I think they're a playoff team this year, but I still think that it's going to be a little bit of doom and gloom there in New York. It's not going to be as smooth sailing as it was before, but I believe in Melo, I believe in Phil Jackson.
What are they going to be like when things aren't going well? Because it will be a very, very long transition process, I think, because they're bringing in a new coach, they're bringing in a new offense. It'll be very lucky if things kick off straight away, but either way, it'll never be boring in the Garden. And
it never is boring in the Garden, the Mecca, but another team that I'm not going to say they nailed their off-season re-signings because they lost their biggest guy, but they were able to bring back Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, and that's the Miami Heat.
Look, the Miami Heat, I think, are still going to be a good team. I think a lot of people are underrating them, they're underselling them. They brought in Luol Deng as well, which I think it puts them there or thereabouts. They're not going to be a number 1 seed or a number 2 seed like they were in the past, but I think top 4 is still realistic for the Miami Heat. But
they've still got a good rotation.
It's a good team. They've got a good coach. They've got Pat Riley still there. Not that much has changed outside of losing the best player in basketball.
Danny Granger, Danger Granger.
But we'll move along from the off-season acquisitions, trades, and re-signings, and we'll have a look at the race. Who's in this race for the Eastern Conference? We've obviously got the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Chicago Bulls. I think the Washington Wizards and the Miami Heat. They're my big 4 going into this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that those 4 teams are the 4 teams that you can legitimately make an argument that they could be a team that could come out of the Eastern Conference and make it to the conference and make it through to the NBA Finals. Another team that I want to talk about, who I'd say probably a little bit more in the chase rather than the race, but I think that we're going to get a bit forward from them over this regular season, is the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors sneakily have the best schedule in the NBA. They're playing in the Atlantic Division, which is
a toilet.
It's proof.
It's a toilet.
It's proof that God has a sense of humor, that this division actually exists right now.
Absolutely. The Atlantic Division is probably as bad as it's been in a long time. You've got the Knicks that are trying to make it. You've got the Nets that are in all kinds of trouble with their injury concerns and whatnot. They do have a new coach, which I think can help a little bit, but the 76ers and the Boston Celtics will not be offering up anything. So for the Toronto Raptors, they have a pretty good chance here to lock up the 3rd seed. If they're coming out at the top of the Atlantic Division, there's a pretty easy run for them.
I think they could even go higher. I mean, it is just going to be such an easy schedule.
There's a lot of easy games.
Yeah. They are going to be a real regular season team out there, and so I think that we could get get a bit fooled by exactly how good they are throughout this regular season once we get to the playoffs.
And maybe they'll prove once and for all that they have the best backcourt in the NBA.
Maybe they will. Maybe they won't, but they will.
All right, now let's talk about rookies. There's a lot of young rookies that are coming into this into the league this year. The 2014 draft class, probably the most overhyped, or hyped adequately in many years. But the Eastern Conference does have a couple of high flyers that I'm pretty excited about watching. The first batch of rookies is Alfred Payton and Aaron Gordon from the Orlando Magic. We've got a great, smart, young point guard to go alongside Victor Oladipo and arguably Blake Griffin 2.0 in Aaron Gordon. He's throwing down some huge dunks in preseason, and I think this team is going to be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. They're not going to win any games, but they'll be a lot of fun to watch.
They've looked quite good in preseason together this unit. I really like what they've done. I mean, you look at the Orlando Magic, and they're the team that won the Dwight Howard trade. Out of all these, they're the ones
by
that won
so
it.
much.
Yeah, because I mean, they got those two. Oladipo, Vucevic. They've pulled together a nice young core around these guys moving forward. And I mean, Aaron Gordon, I'm absolutely loving what I'm seeing from him. He's going to be one of the best young interior players in the NBA for a while now. And Alfred Payton, he's got a very good shot of being in a draft class that was full of point guards. I mean, we'll talk about Dante Exum later. We'll talk about Marcus Smart. This guy looks like the guy who could potentially end up being the best point guard out of this draft.
And the biggest thing with Alfred Payton is now that Victor Oladipo will be out for a month with injury, the team is his. It's his to run. Jameer Nelson's gone. He's got a month here.
It's Alfred Payton's world.
But that's the fact. He's going to start this 82-game season with the team in his hands, and I think that's the best way for a young point guard to sort of be thrown in with not really that much expectation. The Magic know they're not going to win a lot of games, but the fact that they have the trust in him to sort of start this season off with it being his team, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But I think Jabari Parker is probably the rookie to watch out of this Eastern Conference, and I think he will be the rookie of the year just because he's going to play on a bad team, he's going to put up a lot of shots, and he's going to score a lot of points.
He's the guy that we're definitely looking at to be rookie of the year right now because, I mean, basically rookie of the year is the guy who puts up the most stats.
Most minutes, most points. That's it.
Yep,
that's how you win rookie of the year.
Fill it up. It's foolproof. It's foolproof, Jerry. It's foolproof. So he's looked good so far from what we've seen. I mean, he's a guy he can create in the perimeter. He can get to the hole himself. He's got such an advanced offensive
game. He can do
game.
everything. For a young guy, he can do everything. He's like a young Carmelo, Paul Pierce kind of situation, but he's playing on a fun team too. Again, we're looking at these young teams. We've got Giannis, we've got him as well, and my boy Kendall Marshall as well. So
can't forget the K Butter
and Jason Kidd as well coaching. So this team again not going to be good, but will be fun.
A couple of other rookies that I want to point out to watch. Doug McDermott, I think he's going to see some seriously good important minutes throughout this season playing on the Chicago Bulls, being that guy who
and straight away as well. I think
who can hit a three, knock down shots. He'll be very well used, and also James Ennis. I want to throw a shout out to former Perth Wildcat James Ennis because he has just looked so good in this preseason, and I feel I can see him getting meaningful minutes for the Miami Heat and potentially being a guy who we could be talking about come February when the rookie sophomore game comes up.
Well, I think as far as most impressive rookies, this guy's had a season down in Australia playing at a pretty high level. He was one of the top players in the league, if not the best player in the league last season, and the depth at the small forward position, while it is large at the Miami Heat, you've got Luol Deng, you've got Danny Granger. James Ennis sort of fits somewhere in between where he is a lot younger, he's an athletic guy, he can play on the perimeter, he can shoot the three, whereas Luol Deng has been in the league for a long time, playing 55 minutes a night under Tom Thibodeau, so he will need his rest at times. And Danny Granger, we don't really know what he's going to be. So as far as I'm concerned, I think James Ennis is, he's the backup to Luol Deng, so he is going to get a lot of minutes and be a lot of fun.
Okay, Benyam, to wrap this up, I mean, we've gone through who we feel the contenders are, who the guys are in the chase, but for you, what is your eight? Who are going to be the 8 teams that can come through?
Final 8?
Yep, your final 8.
Let's go. Final 8 predictions. These will be horribly wrong by the end of the season, but I will go for it. At number 1, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Chicago Bulls, the Miami Heat, and the Toronto Raptors rounding out the top 4. The Washington Wizards, the Charlotte Hornets, the Atlanta Hawks, and then the New York Knicks sneaking in with the number 8 seed. What about yourself? What do you got?
Just like you, I've got the Cleveland Cavaliers at number 1. I've got the Toronto Raptors at number 2, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The Chicago Bulls at number 3, the Washington Wizards at 4, the Miami Heat at 5, the Charlotte Hornets at 6, the Atlanta Hawks, and the New York Knicks rounding up the 8. But yeah, I mean, with Toronto, I've got them up at 2. People might scratch their heads. I don't think they're going to be contenders, but
they're going to be a regular.
They are going to be a regular season team that are going to seriously notch up a lot of wins.
I couldn't help but agree with you on that front. I think the Toronto Raptors have the schedule. They have a good, exciting young team, and the Eastern Conference.
And they got Drake.
Case closed.
Yep. Well, on that note, I guess that's all we've got for the Eastern Conference today. Always good to finish on Drake. You start on Drake, now he's here, and you finish with him as well. So thanks very much, guys, for tuning into our Eastern Conference preview. Stay tuned for our Western Conference preview, which will be coming up later on BelieveTheHypeNBA.com.
We'll see you then.